Welcome back everybody to Moderate Mods, and today we're dealing with the 1953 Chevrolet Corvette C1, the first ever Corvette, and yeah, it's a rather different car to what, the Corvettes of today or even of the last 10 years are like. Sure, it's got rear wheel drive, but it certainly doesn't have the same kind of power from the same kind of engines, but yeah, it's certainly a car that has a decent amount going for it, but is also fundamentally flawed in a few ways. So yeah, nonetheless, let's get on to the circuit and see the car's stats, and yeah, then see what kind of lap time we can do. So yeah, as you can see, in terms of stats, it's reasonable in terms of braking and handling. Acceleration isn't all that great, and neither is the launch, but the top speed, even though it's only about 105 or so I think, isn't half bad, especially considering what gearbox it's got. And it's got 160 horsepower, 223 pounds-feet of torque from a 3.8 litre or 3.9 litre inline 6 engine. So yeah, not a V8, not a small block V8, not a large V8 or anything like that, in inline 6, which yeah, Corvettes haven't had ever since this came out, so it's pretty much an outlier in that regard. But it does only weigh 2,900 pounds, which is very little for an American car from the time. And yeah, let's nonetheless get onto the circuit and see what it can do, see what kind of time we're going to get out of this thing. But yeah, the big problem with this car is going to be really evident quite quickly. It's not the power, it's not the torque, but it is the gearbox. It does not provide any kind of aggression, or it doesn't use the power or the torque all that well either. It doesn't give it a good launch, as you saw there, and it's only a 2-speed as well, so yeah, really does make the car way slower than it ever should be with the kind of power that and the torque that it's got from a reasonably large engine. So yeah, it just strangles all of the power, which is something we've seen from other American cars that we've put on this series, like the Impala and the Crown Victoria. But this is even worse, because while they have a fair decent amount of power and torque, they've also got at least more than 2 gears, whereas this doesn't have as much torque or power as those cars, while only dealing with 2 gears. So yeah, not a great start in the Corvette life, for sure, because these are supposed to be sports cars, and yet this gearbox really does not allow it to be a sports car. But then you could say, oh, it's a cruiser, it's supposed to be driven, at a reasonable speed, but not supposed to be aggressive or fast or anything like that. But then if it's supposed to be a cruiser, then why does it have an overdrive gear or more gears to make the car quieter at high speeds? Because you'll be doing 60, 65, even 70 mile an hour in this, and you'll be doing more than 3,000 revs, which obviously isn't all that much in comparison to how much revs this car can actually do, but it's still hardly a quiet engine note at that kind of speed, never mind the fact you've also got wind noise to deal with. But 1 minute 28.822 is our first lap time there. I think we can improve on that a bit. The car also does roll around a fair bit as well. It's got some understeer. It's not got any oversteer because the gearbox, like I said, strangles the torque and the power, so the likelihood of oversteering is very limited. Certainly not going to get much in the way of wheel spin or smoke from the tyres. And a big problem with this car is what Europe was doing at the time. You only have to look at a Jaguar with the XK120, which has a smaller engine than this, but it's also inline 6, is rear wheel drive, is heavier than this, but it has 50 extra horsepower, about the same amount of torque, but because it has a far better gearbox, is quicker in terms of acceleration, is better in terms of launch, is better in terms of top speed, and yeah, was the fastest car in the world at the time. So yeah, this really was outclassed in a lot of ways, which is probably why there weren't all that many made. There we go, 1 minute 19.096, so a decent improvement there, no doubt, because we weren't struggling with the launch at the start of the first lap. Let's see if we can improve any further. I mean, look, we can't even keep up with a I think it's a Volkswagen Scirocco, which has less power than this, because that has a gearbox that actually makes the most of what power it has. Whereas this is really rather slow in terms of its get up and go because of that gearbox. I don't have a problem with the fact that it's an inline-six engine by any means as well, if you're wondering that. I know it's an engine that I think was from Chevrolet's trucks at the time, but it's a decent engine. It sounds fairly good, I actually think, and yeah, it certainly has the potential to be a good engine with the right gearbox and the right setup on the car, but in this current form it's just not given a chance to shine or prove itself, so yeah, which is a bit of a shame. We're definitely going to improve with this final lap by a decent margin there, 1 minute 17.277 seconds. So yeah, that's a decent time, but yeah, this car is definitely capable of more. So yeah, let's get to the garage and see what this car can do. So yeah, there's not much to this car when you strip it down, because yeah, it's only a two-seater. It's got a reasonably large boot, but yeah, this is all about being a sports car, even with the lackluster gearbox. I don't even think it came with a roof. If it did, I have yet to see one with one up, but yeah, it's the gearbox that is the main problem. Not this engine by any means, even though it's hardly the best engine that was ever put in a Corvette, but it's that gearbox. So yeah, let's see what we can do with that gearbox for starters. Right, we'll see what a street transmission does first. I want to see how many gears it gives it. It unfortunately doesn't tell you when upgrading, only will tell you in the tuning area, so I just want to make sure it's at least a 4-speed before we go any further. Yeah, it's a 5-speed, that'll do. Don't need it to be any more than that. 5-speed is going to be more than enough, and as you can see by the stat increase on the top speed, it's done wonders for its top speed. Not changed much in terms of launch or acceleration, but top speed definitely has gone up, so that's good. We'll give it a street clutch as well, and we'll give it a racing driving line, knock out some of that weight. Right, we'll whack up the tyres a bit, make them nice and wide to make the most of what tread we have. Brakes, we'll give it some street brakes. Brakes aren't the worst part of this car by any means, so that's alright. We'll give it some street suspension to make it stop wallowing around a fair bit. Sportish front and rear anti-roll bars. We don't need to knock out any weight, because as you can see it only weighs at the moment a little bit more than it did originally, but it's still only £2,908, so it's hardly a large amount. Right, engine, we'll whack it up to 4 litres, make it a little bit bigger. We'll improve the air intake, take it up to 170. Then we'll give it a sporty manifold, a sporty carburettor. I want to keep it an even number. I'm a bit of a stickler for that, to be honest. And then I don't want to give it race ignition really. Street ignition, and see if we can get the valves to go. Yeah, there we go. Sporty pistons and compression takes it up to 195, which I think is more than enough, to be honest. And then we'll give it a street flywheel, knock out a couple more pounds. And yeah, I think that's going to be it, to be honest. What engines could we put in if we wanted to? 3.2 litre inline 6, and obviously a V8, but yeah, they're giving out a bit too much power for me as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, we'll save that, because I actually accidentally forgot to show you what the original stats were for the acceleration. So we'll just quickly look at that, and then we'll put the upgrades in. So yeah, it's hardly the quickest car in terms of acceleration, as you'll see. So yeah, 11 seconds to 60, 29 seconds to 100, and only do 104 miles an hour, which is not all that great for a car with 160 brake horsepower and 223 pound-feet of torque. So let's see what happens when we stick our upgrades in and see how much of an improvement we have. So 0 to 60 now in 8.411 seconds, 0 to 100 in 23.116 seconds, and it will now go on to a top speed of 135 miles an hour. So that's a 31 mile an hour, no, 31 mile an hour improvement in terms of top speed, which is a huge leap. It's nearly 3 seconds quicker to 60. It's nearly 6 seconds quicker to 100, and yeah, it's undoubtedly going to be a far faster car, a far nicer car to drive when we get back out onto the circuit. So let's get there and see how much better this car is. So we're still in D class, but as you can see by the stats, everything has been improved by a reasonable amount. The top speed has been the biggest increase, but the acceleration has been done enough, the handling and braking has done reasonably well as well, and the launch has been improved by a significant margin as well. And yeah, that's the stats that we're packing. We're only a pound lighter than we were before, but we've now got 35 extra pounds-feet of torque. We've got nearly 50 extra pounds-feet of torque as well as the 35 extra horsepower. And yeah, because we're a pound lighter, that means we're also a little bit less in terms of weight, though not by all that much. The tyres really did add a fair bit of weight there to the car, but you know, and so did the carburetor, I think, as well. But yeah, that's just the way it is sometimes. You have to be a compromise in some areas, but on the whole, this is undoubtedly going to be a quicker car. Better launch? No. For some reason, the launch is still a bit of a stickler, but we will have better acceleration overall, and we'll have more gears to play with once we eventually get up and go. So yeah, it's not the quickest thing off the line still. Maybe if we were able to rev it before we set off, it would be a bit better. The way that races and rivals modes start on this game, you don't really get the chance to rev your car before you go. But yeah, undoubtedly this is going to be a better car overall. It's not rolling around nearly as much as before. It's got a lot more grip in the corners because of those wider tyres. And once we get onto that back straight, we'll also have a higher top speed to play with as well. Still not perfect in terms of handling, but then again, that's to be expected. We've only really widened the tyres and mildly done up the suspension. Yeah, it definitely feels faster. We're accelerating even as we come up to this hill, which I think we were struggling to do before. And crucially, it still feels really rather smooth to drive. So yeah, we had a 1 minute 23.3 second lap time there. Obviously we're aiming to be below 1 minute 17.277. Obviously you could improve this further, but the whole point of this series is to show that you don't need to do massive improvements just to make the car better than what the stock version was. Obviously I imagine plenty of people put a bigger engine in it with way more power, but I want to keep things simple and still true to the original kind of vision of the car. Which is to be a usable sports car. And we're about to beat our best lap time from the stock version. 1 minute 15.409, so nearly 2 seconds quicker, which is fairly reasonable. Obviously the one advantage of the 2-speed gearbox in this car is the fact that it, you know, didn't really have anything to slow it down as soon as it got to second. Obviously we have to change a couple more times before we even get to 100 mile an hour. But the fact that we have more gears to play with means that this car is a much easier car to use, and it's undoubtedly quicker where it matters, which is coming out of corners, and yeah, accelerating out of those corners and beyond. And a massive improvement incoming on our final lap. 1 minute 13.657, which is, yeah, a significant improvement over the standard car, which managed 1 minute 17.277. So yeah, overall massively impressed with this car, with this upgraded version. Obviously we've only done mild upgrades. You can do a lot more to this car, obviously, as we saw. You can give it a big V8 with more than 400 horsepower, you could give it all-wheel drive, you could massively lighten it and everything like that, but yeah, like I said, this series is to just show what mild upgrades can do to a vehicle, and this has done a fair bit. It's better in terms of acceleration, it's better in terms of top speed, doesn't wallow around as much with the new suspension, it's got more grip, and yeah, the brakes are slightly better, and I imagine the launch, if we're given the chance to rev the engine, is better off the line as well. So yeah, really rather good car this. I do like it even in the stock form because it's a bit unusual in terms of the lineup of other Corvettes, but yeah, no doubt that it does have its flaws, mostly being down to that gearbox. Nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.